Tuning into Stampscaping 101. I just had a lot of fun stamping this half-page scene out, 4¼ by 11 inches. And my only thoughts going into this one was I wanted to do a blue scene using some wolves. Okay, this goes out to someone in mind that likes the color blue and likes wolves. So I went with a longer format on this scene. I don't know, I didn't really think about it too much going ahead. It just happens to be the paper that I chose, but I really like the composition of this and having these wolves kind of it's not single file, but kind of running towards this kind of directional light that I had in mind. I had an idea that I would have the light kind of coming, in a strong kind of directional format by having things light over here and dark over here. For me, that's kind of big because I usually have things kind of backlit and things on the sides are darker, and I like how that kind of contains the imagery and whatnot. But I felt that the I don't know, just having this kind of lighter area right here might be kind of more effective for the I don't know, kind of the message I'm kind of going after in this one. With these kind of these wolves like having a great time and frolicking, and they're all kind of going from right to left, so I wanted to leave that area light in there. Okay, now I did a couple things in there, and I'll mention it in the video if you choose to watch it, but the snowy bank here is kind of angled a little bit. I didn't stamp it just, vertical like that. So see, I mean, it almost is, but I kind of turned it up like that a little bit and stamped it like that. And that kind of creates a little bit of a visual movement within a scene when you kind of slant things a little bit. I mean, if I go, really extreme, it makes it a little bit more dramatic, but if you kind of skew things a little bit, it can add a sense of drama into a scene, and the extent of which you do it at, kind of controls that amount of drama that can be added, okay? And I thought that, also kind of reiterated this idea of this kind of light, how light kind of comes in at, like light beams come in at angles like that. I thought that would kind of lend itself to that spirit there. Okay, so a couple little subtle things if you choose to do a composition like that. You see how these walls are stamped in black, okay? Well, these trees right behind them, I just stamped them in a color out of my color scheme that I'm working in, okay? If you're doing something much more kind of straightforward in terms of like a high noon type of coloring scheme, and if you want your tree trunks to be like grays or browns or something like that, I would recommend doing them in a little bit of a lighter value than the black itself. And then what I did was I just did this simple trick of I colored it in, and then I just kind of wiped off some of the ink off the bottom portion so it stamps in a lighter value inherently within the impression, which kind of makes the bottom areas visible but yet lighter for my star kind of attraction, within this scene, the wolves, so they could stand out more, because if all these things were really dark in the background, these wolves wouldn't stand out as much, unless you want that to be kind of the spirit of the piece. Maybe the wolves are seen as something like where they're really tied into the landscape and you can barely see them because they're so kind of camouflaged or whatnot, so you can also do that type of thing. But if you want them to stand out, just make whatever you're going to stamp behind them lighter so that their silhouettes of their shapes really pop out against those lighter values in the background. So anyways, a really fun scene, and I don't know, I feel that it's very reasonably dramatic a piece, and pretty simple to do, and you just kind of follow suit with all of your touches to reiterate that certain type of lighting direction. And if you watch this video, you'll see what I'm talking about when I get into the kind of the detailed areas using media like pigment ink and gel pens. So thanks again for watching. Okay, let's see what we can do with a wolf theme done in blue. I have some dye-based inks here and various values of blue, including a little bit of a temperature change blue here. Otherwise, the other ones are cool blues. Add a little bit of yellow to it, and you get somewhat of a Caribbean blue, which is the name of that color right there. It's something that I've been adding in lately. I didn't used to use that version of blue very much, but I really like how it kind of warms things up a little bit. The degree of which is just dependent on how much you use of it and how much of the other values of blue you might use. Okay, but if you're doing this at home or kind of following along with me, you can use whatever values you have. And I mean, I'm using Marvies right here just because it's going to be fast here today, and I just wanted to move along very quickly, and those, what is it, 5 values of or different blues will suffice in terms of this, no question. Okay, I'm just stamping out the snowy bank here. I'm going to stamp it at a little bit of an angle, just to kind of add a little bit of a kind of a visual dynamic to the piece. Sometimes when you do things at an angle, it gives a little bit of a visual movement to a scene and adds a sense of drama. And it doesn't have to be something that is, you know, you would see out in nature at an angle, okay? This certainly could be, but it doesn't have to be. You can turn cabins or houses, you know, at an angle or something like that. It'll just inherently change the kind of the structure of a piece, and you know, just change the overall spirit of it by whatever degree you want, you know, depending on whatever angle you put it at. Okay, so we have 2 of them, and this is done on a half piece of paper. This one is 4 1/4 by 11 inches. Okay, and you can see where I've just overlapped the snowy bank. I'm guessing about 1/4 inch or something like that. It's hard to tell, but that's what you want in scenic imagery, where you're going for a seamless aspect of to things. Okay, now I have some trees here. Now I could stamp these kind of right side up or at an angle. But, okay, now I have these wolves in here, and let's see. I'm trying to decide what I want in the background and what color I want to stamp these in. I want to stamp these light enough to where they won't interfere with my visuals of these. Okay, so if I stamp these trees in black in the background here, and I want these wolves to show up against that, it'll interfere with the silhouette. So you can use these, but you just utilize your, you know, your color scheme here that you've picked out and lined up. And that's what I always recommended to people in my workshops. I said, pick out your color scheme and lay out your CADs, okay, before you start your scene, because you can incorporate that into the mix. It doesn't have to be something where kind of we're laying things out in kind of more of a coloring book style, where we're stamping everything out in black and then we're going back in and coloring. Okay, that's the way we do a lot of different stamping, and you can certainly do it in scenic stamping, okay, but you can utilize your color scheme kind of further to add that sense of kind of atmosphere and depth, okay, than just stamping everything out in the same value, you know, mostly black or something like that, okay? That's what you would do with a lot of different types of stamping too, like say, you know, where you want a very strong image, such as outline stamps, okay, where you're going to be coloring in. You don't want to be, you know, kind of coloring in something and you can't see the outline anymore. I mean, you certainly could do it that way, but you know, for the most part, in most styles of stamping, we're going for, you know, fairly decent value impressions, you know, with outline designs. But in scenic stamping, if you have tonal designs that you're working with, you know, I would certainly recommend taking advantage, not on all your scenes or something like that. I stamp a lot of my compositions out in all black and then I just color it in. But you can certainly take advantage of the tonal aspect of a lot of designs and utilizing value for kind of greater effect. Okay, so that being said, I've stamped this out, or I've colored this in blue. Okay, it's a fairly dark blue, and that would also interfere with the silhouette of these wolves. Okay, but what I've done is thinking about kind of atmospherics of a scene. I'm thinking about maybe having some mist on the you know, the ground down here, you know, like a 3-foot high low-lying mist or something like that, or fog within the scene, which gives me the excuse to kind of remove a lot of the ink here. I don't know if you can see. It's a little bit darker up here than down here. Down here it's fairly dry now. So I will put these lighter impressions or lighter areas within this impression in the areas that I am to stamp the wool. So it's a little bit of planning, but it's not that much planning. We're talking about 2 designs, and I just don't want them to interfere with each other, okay? So you can see how that looks, and see that gives me a kind of a head start in terms of distance and, like I said, those atmospherics, or, you know, for lack of a better word. Okay, so let's do that again. It looks like I'm not using very much of this design, so I probably don't need to color this top portion of it. Let's go like this. This is how you're removing it, though. I'm removing a pretty good amount of it down here. Okay, and then as I move up here like this, I'm kind of removing a little bit less, so down here quite a bit. And then see, I'm kind of pressing a little bit lighter as I move up, so that it goes from quite dry to medium dry, medium wet, and then to wet up here. So it transitions from dark to light because it's wet to dry. Alright, so a little bit of a trick there as far as kind of strategically planning your piece. Okay, masking off a little bit right there. Let's see, let's go for, I'm gonna go for one more up here. Now see if I'm stamping it up here, right? I don't need to wipe it off. I mean, unless I want to, I could, you know, to give it a little bit of a continuity, but maybe there's less fog right there, I don't know. But let's do a little bit of it. Okay. Okay. Let's go about right here. Kind of compositional thing, elements, sometimes, you know, groupings of 3, kind of add to that kind of overall visual harmony of a piece. Let me see if I can go for another impression of this back in the distance here. I'll just use the same kind of inking that I did, but just go for that second impression at it like that. Okay. I think that looks pretty good. Let's do that again. I'll just go like that. I'll just ink it up and I'll get an impression of it right here. And then I'll just use that second impression right up here, so. Okay. So I said kind of groupings of 3, odd groupings, So there's 5 impressions, but those ones in the background are going to be much more kind of secondary looking things, and they won't be very visible once you add all of the different colors over the top of it. All right, now let's make this piece somewhat light and airy in the background. I don't know if I really want light and airy. It might be kind of heavier in terms of kind of the visuals in the end, but I thought we'd add in some of these clouds right here. I want kind of some light to be coming in to some degree. This is the cloud Cumulus. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe off the surrounding area. I don't necessarily need to do this, wiping it off around the perimeter like this. Wipe it off pretty decently. Okay, it's a good thing I did that because I didn't clean this off. I can see there's black on here still. I'm not real careful about cleaning off my stamps. I mean, I do have my cleaning pad right here. A lot of times I just don't even use it. But, alright, when I am going with something that's quite a bit lighter than my previous, I don't even know what color I used on there. It might have been red or something. I don't know, it is a good idea to clean it off, isn't it? I know some people that used to put their wood-mounted stamps, they would scrub them off under the sink after every use. Or some people, a lot of people would paint nail polish, clear nail polish right around in here and all over their wood. They just didn't want any kind of staining on their stamps. This is way back in the day. Which I didn't think was a bad idea. I just, it was like kind of the opposite of kind of my my process. Okay, so here is this cloud, and let's go about. I want this light to be coming from that direction, so I'm going to turn this, which is top lit, in the direction of that lighting, okay? Alright. Maybe I don't need to blot it off. The salvia blue color is fairly light, so I'm just going to go a little bit like that. These wools will be kind of running into the light. That's my kind of concept of this piece. Which, by the way, this scene is going is dedicated to someone that really loved wolves, and blue may or may not have been her favorite color. I guess I like to wear blue, though. Okay, so, alright, I am going to throw this in here into the mix. It's a Memento Summer Sky, and it just happens to be a very light blue, and has a really nice consistency in terms of it being fairly thick, fairly thick viscosity. Okay, I haven't forgotten about those wools. Okay, they'll be added in here. All right, this is a half-page scene. Maybe I'll add this in here too. This is just a re-inker of a very light blue color. Okay, this one happens to be an Adirondack Aqua. The Memento Summer. It's really time that I get the Summer Sky Memento re-inker. That would expedite my blue process really well. Okay, but when you sop up a lot of ink like this into a sponge, it basically becomes a ink pad on a stick, okay? By the way, these are color box stylus tools. A lot of people are curious about these if they've seen me use this for the first time, but they really make great applicators. They're very absorbent, so they, you know, one inking and application of ink like that, and I just sop it right up into here. It really goes quite a long way because of that absorbency factor. Makeup brushes and things like that are really fantastic too, but they're not absorbent. They don't hold a lot of ink, so the process just takes a little bit longer that way. It has a different look though. one that I really like, and it's a very soft look, but I like getting a kind of a foundation coat going with these lighter inks very quickly, and without having to kind of constantly re-ink. These ones work very well for that. Okay, so we are applying ink right here, of course, but I am doing it somewhat selectively, even though it doesn't look like that. But I'm not being too selective about it, okay? I'm not being real strategic. I just want to create certain areas of light and certain areas of dark, and the specific areas that you decide to do that in really aren't important. It's just for the fact that I'm kind of oscillating things and varying it, okay? So I have areas of light and dark in here, okay? It doesn't look like that because this color right here is very light to begin with, so the summer sky, Memento, would be very light too. It would be a little bit darker than this one. This one's a shadow stamping ink, if you know what that is. These shadow stamping inks haven't been around for a long time, and they were discontinued, so I mean, it's not a lot of people are using it, but the concept of the shadow stamping inks was that people that would stamp out something in a given color, and then you would, clean that stamp off, and then stamp another impression of that same image with the shadow stamping color, which is a very light value, so you can do it in whatever color, and it would look like that object is casting a shadow. I don't know how many people did that. Well, there might have been a few, being that they had an ink for it, but I don't know, I didn't see that being done very much. And the colors just were so light, it's, these things were barely visible. So it's a very light shadow, to say the least. But I loved them for base coats, for what I use them for. Okay, this is a salvia blue here. It's a little bit darker, okay, so kind of just follow along with your guide, so to speak, of your darker tones. Kind of retain some of those lighter tones. I mean, this is still a very light blue, so I'm not having to be too particular about the placement of it. Okay. Just in general, if there's kind of some darker areas on your imagery, you can kind of color them in, And the areas that are lighter, leave them light if you're kind of having a tough time kind of deciding on what you want to leave light and dark. But just in general, I have, this area a little bit light in here, there's a little bit of light here, and a little bit of light back there. So it's kind of oscillating. They call it checkerboarding, or that's one term. You can kind of just oscillate things between light and dark across your page. And like I said, it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, naturally, if you have a sun somewhere or a moon, some sort of light source, you want to keep that object fairly light. But just in, just some various other areas within your piece, just have some reflected light, where that light is affecting things within your piece, and don't get too analytical about it. I certainly don't. They're saying, you might say, well, that's easy for you to say you're good at lighting or something like that, but it's because I just define it somewhere. If there's a moon right here, I don't know if that's going to be light back there, or if it's going to be dark. There's trees in front of it. You just, as the creator and stamper of your piece, you just say the thing that it's, shining a light on. When you think in terms of the lighting aspect of things, you are the lighting director of like a stage or something like that, and just think about, you have access and control of several spotlights. If you have a character over here and a character over here, and there's a moon over here or whatever, or something like that, you just, you will shine the light on whoever you want or whatever you want. your viewers to look at, so you just leave those illuminated. You don't have to be, you know, subject to, say, our notion of reality and what would be lit and what wouldn't be. But like I said, I mean, if you have like a source of light, like it's sun or a moon or something like that, you know, just in general, I would think those would be light, you know. But what I'm talking about more is the, you know, the reflected light within a piece. And that just means, you know, just leave some things lighter than others. Okay? It doesn't really matter, again, too much what those are. Okay, now watch this. This is something I'm doing a little bit of right now. See these little ridges, you know, within this piece? See how I put that little defining line right there? That's saying that there's kind of a change in the surface. Not quality. What's the word I'm looking for? There's a change in surface shape. Okay, there's a dip there, and I've defined it with a little bit of a kind of a defining line here that kind of creeps up there. Now, see, I'm just kind of adding a little bit more shadow to that, so it looks like it kind of undulates. You know, that surface right there. Okay. And I'm kind of tipping this at an angle, but see how that gives it a little bit more dimension by doing it that way? You know, having that little change like that. Okay? And I've put those lines in there to kind of be a guide, at least, you know, in terms of a suggestion on something that you could do as the as you further kind of render your piece. And remember, it's your piece, and you can kind of do whatever you want to do, of course, okay? Now see, this is where kind of this little bank here meets water, so I'm just kind of adding a little bit more tone down there to define the transition between that snowy bank and, you know, perhaps that's water, or it could be frozen water, who knows. And I'm using the applicator kind of at an angle like this and using the side of it. Okay, so you can kind of see the, you know, hopefully you can kind of see the general lighting scheme kind of, you know, developing a little bit further with I don't know, what was that? That was the second color I've used. Let's go to the light blue, which is kind of more of a medium blue. Bahama blue would be good too. That's kind of a real similar, you know, value of blue to the light blue from Marvy. It's kind of the same kind of properties of the light blue from Marv. It's kind of a fairly light blue. The hue is almost exactly the same. The viscosity of the inks, though, are different. The Memento inks, in general, are thicker than Marvy. Marvy colors are just about the thinnest inks that I know. So sometimes they're good to use if you want to, if you need to go for some penetration, if your page is really soaked with all the other colors you've used. and you just can't get very much more of an application of ink, because kind of when you start applying wet into wet, the inks don't transfer in the way that dye-based inks transfer, is to stain whatever surface they're being applied to. Okay, I'm using the Memento Bahama blue here. I'll use a little bit of the light blue as well here, but kind of just going along here, and just like I said, I'm just kind of building up more and more things that I've kind of already established with the lighter color. But maybe I use a little bit less of this one, you know, the darker you get. But yeah, that viscosity of the inks are a little bit different. So you can mix and match your different brands and lines of inks. Now, mixing and matching kind of different types of inks, pigment and dye, you know, that's a different story. Those are for different effects and whatnot, and you just have to kind of be kind of conscious of the process that you would do that in, you know, which type you would have to lay down first in order for the second one to be able to be applied. You know, you can't lay down like pigment inks here that sit on the surface of the paper and then apply dye-based inks over the top of it without affecting that pigment ink that would be already set. And sometimes like alcohol inks, you know, you might lay it down, and you know how alcohol inks kind of they kind of lay on the surface and kind of seal off things to a degree. So if you try to go with a dye-based ink over the top of an alcohol, it may, you know, depending on how much alcohol was laid down, it's hard to say if the dye-based inks would apply and stick to the top of it. Kind of when doing these things, there's, you know, there might be general kind of principles or whatever properties that that would apply, but there's always exceptions, you know, during, you know, when it comes to the brands of inks and the different surfaces that you might be working in, and the degree of which you know, to which you might use a certain medium over that surface. Okay, but we're really getting somewhere in terms of kind of our development of light and dark in here. I don't know what type of color this person, what type of blue they like, so I'm just going to try to add in, you know, just a vast kind of range of blues in here, and hopefully it was one of those. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's try the Marvy. My mementos are getting a little bit dry. I like to use a pretty thick layer of ink when I'm doing these scenes. So juicy pads are very good for this type of process here. If things are kind of grabbing and dragging a little bit, you know, try to sop up a little bit more ink. You can put down a puddle of it and then just kind of drag it in. This happens to be a glossy cardstock that I'm working on. Working with and on. But going back to that, the application kind of ease of this. One of the things you can easily do is you can kind of wet your applicator a little bit before you start sponging on. So wet this, kind of, you know, squeeze it out, and then apply some ink. It'll dilute your ink a little bit, so it won't be as bright as directly out of the pad, but it'll give you some additional moisture in here to kind of start your, your coloring process if you do happen to be using any kind of sponge type of application method. The cosmetic sponges, the wedge style sponges, work very good for this. You'll get your fingers a little bit more inky probably, but who cares? Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna give this little area in here a little bit of tone. About like so. Okay. I'm deciding whether or not to kind of change my tip here, use the same one for the Caribbean blue. It's, like I said, the Caribbean blue is a little bit warmer. I decided I'm not going to, and I'm just going to go right into it. You won't see a huge change, I don't think, except if I use a little bit of that Caribbean blue in the lighter areas, like where it's still white, then you'll be able to see a little bit more of that warmth. But dye-based inks, as I've said in other videos, I always say it as a reminder for those that are new to the channel, dye-based inks are transparent, so even if you lay it down over the top of all these other colors, I think it should influence the overall kind of appearance of the piece, even if you don't get kind of a straight version of that color, as if it were just done on white paper. Because this, even though I'm laying it down over the top of the other colors are influencing what we see. As if each color application is transparent, which they are. So it's like transparent overlays over one another. And that's what gives the pieces, hopefully, in the end result, kind of a nice glow. In the areas that you've retained kind of the lighter values, or even if, maybe the white of the paper will look as though they're kind of casting a light, and light is coming from within the piece. All right. Let's move on. Let's go to blue. This is the same blue that we stamped out our trees in, okay? So if we've stamped out any type of imagery in a certain color, it really takes getting to that color to really start to blend in that imagery, okay? So if something is stamped out in blue, you're seeing that light is hitting it and reflecting back to you in that color. So that being said, if that's the kind of color being cast, that colored light, that's what you're doing. You're bringing in that color and making it part of the lighting scheme where it kind of makes sense, okay? Now I'm adding this down right here, but you can see if I add this, I squeeze that down, you can kind of see that sponge tip color right there, but see, it's kind of lighter than that impression right there, because that's a full impression right into a dry piece of paper. But I'm applying, don't do that technique. I'm just doing that, to make a point. But see, squeeze down like that, that is that color. But this color is over the top of all these other colors. And it's really wet down there, so that really spreads about very easily, okay? Those wools should look pretty cool when stamped in there. I'm just kind of waiting for the last moment to stamp those in. I'm going to do it in a VersaFine, probably. Or am I? I don't know. I guess I could do it in Marby Black, which is my kind of black of choice. Okay. See how those kind of recede in the background, you know, doing them in lighter values like that. Okay, now I mentioned stamping out your objects in blue and getting to that blue to kind of incorporate them into the scene. That goes the same for black. I have to use black in here to kind of incorporate that black into there a little bit more fully, because you're seeing that within the design there's a lot of shade, dark and light, done in, you know, dots. So if I stamp this out in black, if I use black to kind of blend everything in, it'll look a little more integrated. Alright, oh, I have a Prussian blue here. That is a really dark blue. I love it. See how much darker it gets like that? And it'll get darker over the top of, you know, a very wet page as well, so this is getting pretty saturated with ink, but it still penetrates and stains very nicely. So it stains your fingers, it stains everything, you know. It's not permanent or anything like that, it's still dye-based, but there's some kind of property to it that really, really, you know, allows it to do its thing. It'll get all over your fingers too, but, you know, you just rinse it off with wash your hands afterwards and scrub it. Scrub your fingertips if you need to. If you have one of those pumice sponges or something like that, those work really great. It seems like all stamp stores used to, you know, have one of those around their sink area. I just use you know, kind of the scouring side of a, you know, kitchen sponge or whatever. Really using the kind of the edge of this applicator here now to get into some of those little tiny areas. All right. Prussian blue. It's a great blue. I can never have enough blue to... I don't know. It's not really... I don't think it's my favorite color. It's one of my favorites. I tend to like a lot of cool color schemes, although you know, it doesn't mean I don't dislike any other color scheme, but it's one that I tend to be kind of a little bit more drawn to. Really deep, you know, blue-green... I don't know, skies, twilights, deep blue, nighttime, Milky Way, you know, types of visuals, and, I don't know, Caribbean blue waters of, Gulf side of the Baja Peninsula. I don't know, those are the types of things that I've always kind of, really noticed, like in photographs and whatnot. Anyways, adding in black here, do you see that? It's kind of bring things together a little bit more. Kind of just reiterating things, shading areas within the forms. Again, I'm kind of going back to that differentiation between the frozen water, maybe, perhaps, or just whatever this is next to the bank. Okay, so I'm making a little bit of a kind of differentiation between that and that, saying that it's kind of a different, I don't know, quality. Water to snow, hard to soft, maybe. Kind of this is that kind of the point where things really start to kind of finalize. I'm seeing kind of more of the traits that I'm going for. I mean, it took me getting back to the black, but I mean, you could have done it. I could have done black right off the bat, like I've done recently, and a couple things I've just done a grayscale thing, and went right in with the black to define a lot of the areas just very quickly. But on this one, I mean, if you want to have a really strong kind of color glow working in your piece with all those deep blues and lighter blues and medium blues and whatnot, going through those color transitions really kind of lends itself to kind of achieving kind of that deeper saturated look. Okay, so hopefully it looks like the lighting is kind of coming from that direction. I mean, I usually kind of contain things like this, but I wanted really to kind of give that that movement, that visual movement to the piece, by having kind of a light trail to kind of follow. All right, now let's see. I really feel like doing these in kind of a real dark value of black, which would be the VersaFine. But the thing about the VersaFine is you can't put certain things over the top of VersaFine because it'll smear, even after they're dry, because it sits on the top of the paper. Alright, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with a very, hopefully, dark black impression. Yeah, okay, I've run out of a black ink here. It's very rare to run out of ink. It takes so long. These things are really, you get a lot of mileage out of them, but not to fear. I have another rinker here of my black. Wow. I can't remember the last time I've thrown away a re-inker bottle of any color. They last forever. Well, until they run out. Okay, so let's go ahead. It's time to stamp these. these wolves here. I happen to be using tack and peel. Okay, it's just this material that you put on your acrylic blocks like this, and it makes it super tacky. And for that temporarily mounting of your unmounted stamps, works very well for that. Okay. All right, let's do the same thing on these wolves that I did with the trees. Well, what did I do with the trees? Well, we blotted off some of this bottom portion, like around their legs. I'm not going to go so high up them because I don't want them to be just completely light, but I'll rub off some of this ink off the bottom portions to give kind of this, feeling like they're running in, some degree of kind of this low-lying fog. That fog, for like stage productions or videos and movies, they always use that fog machine whenever they're in forests and whatnot. It gives a little bit more kind of a visual richness to, to a given set and scene. And I like it in my scenes too. I think it just looks a little more full that way. We're aware of that space in between things, so instead of just being an object here, 5, 10, 20 feet away from you, it's all that space in between that kind of this fog or atmospherics kind of can fill in and kind of lend itself to a really nice, rich visual. And when you have things like fog or something like that, it provides another surface besides the actual objects for light to reflect off of, okay? And, it kind of moves or something like that too. Now, this is a still shot right here, not a movie scene or something like that, but that's what it can do. All right, so right there, you see how their legs are a little bit lighter? That's just one of those little tweaks that, that's a little trick to do in your pieces, especially when it comes to like a silhouette type of image. All right, so always keep your paper, this plastic sheet for your tack and peel. Otherwise, you can just put this block down or put something on top of the block, and it really sticks like crazy. It's not sticky in terms of like glue or something like this. It just has that tacky kind of color form. Now, I just washed these off, and it is really hard to pull that off because it just, when you wash them off, it just returns the tackiness to like brand new conditions, All right, so these are a couple smaller wolves. They could represent something that's farther off in the distance, or they could be younger. I don't know. I see them as kind of like more distant wolves. 2 would be fine. I don't know. 2 is fine. Is 4 better? I don't know. Okay, so doing that thing, just kind of wiping them off like that. If I stamp these out in lighter value of black too, like if I stamp it once and go for that second impression, they would look like they're really far in the distance. Maybe I'll take off a little bit more ink off these ones. So that they're kind of a little bit back further in the mist. Yeah, something like that. I stamped them a little bit higher. Typically things that are higher represent things that are farther back in terms of Western perspective. Okay, let's go for some additional types of textural and distant imagery within this piece. And let's see. I'm just looking to see what's on my desk right now. Okay, here's this branch. I can put this branch in here. It's just like a leafless branch. And I don't know if I want that one. Okay, I can have these rocks right here. I love adding in these kind of little textural elements into a scene just to add a little bit more texture to a given piece. This one's tiny rocks. Let's do this one in the water area, but let's do it, instead of doing it in black, let's just do it in a blue. This one's a Prussian blue. You have to do it in a blue that'll show up, but you know, blot that off once. So it's in the lighter area. Maybe I'll stamp out a lighter version of it. Okay. Darker version of it in the darker area. Does that make sense? This will be like the third impression of it. Off of one inking, so it just goes, you know, it's much lighter in value in the lighter area. So that's like what I was saying, you can utilize your color scheme, you know, to full advantage. You can have it define light within a piece by stamping out in a lighter version. Okay, so I'm deciding. Oh. Before I get to the next segment of this video, I'm going to have to let these things dry, allow it to dry. These walls are a little bit, so I can see some of them. I don't know if I can get that pick up on the video, but they're a little bit wet. Not too wet. This ink dries pretty quickly, but I don't want to apply anything over the top of it and have it be too wet to apply with confidence. You know, confident that it won't smear. Alright, just some reeds right here, just for some additional texture. Now see, I'm kind of leaning this with each impression. I'm kind of going this way. Alright. See, things are moving in that direction, so see, I've kind of drawn this with these certain directional patterns to them, so they can kind of lead the eye. See, they're kind of leaning that way, and that's the way the lighting is coming from, okay? But you can also do it vertically, no problem, or you can do it in the opposite direction like that. So I've angled these, designed this grass, you know, to kind of reiterate kind of the direction that you, as the director of your scene, want your viewers to look. So it's kind of going that way, you know, in this case, by the angle that you stamp it in, okay? I don't want everything like this, like stamp, stamp, stamp. I think that would be too extreme, so I just kind of went stamp, 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 stamp. Re-ink in between impressions, of course, so that you get a nice crisp impression. Okay, so I really like foreground. I really love depth within a scene, so let me just use this leaf stamp to something coming from an overhang right here. Okay, just re-inking this black is giving me a really strong impression. I've been going with VersaFine a lot, just because it is so extremely dark, and it is darker than this Marvy black. I don't know, this Marvy black looks awfully dark, yeah, right now. Sometimes next to the VersaFine it doesn't look so much. Okay, so this is saying that we have some trees probably close to us on this other side of this bank that, you know, are kind of, you know, has some of that foliage on them. Yeah, foliage in truth would probably be already fallen if it's this degree of winter here, but I don't care. I like it. Maybe there was like the first snow of winter last night or something like that here, so you still get some of the foliage in there. And it's holding fast, you know. It got frozen onto the branches and whatnot. But I don't know. I think that looks fairly dramatic that way, you know, kind of having that top layering and, you know, we have this kind of bottom. But doesn't that kind of focus the viewer's eye on these wools and this kind of passage here to kind of put that on the top here and on the bottom? And again, things are kind of just reiterated in terms of the direction here, and you can see that kind of slope right there. I mean, I think it would be fine looking like that too, but having that at an angle like that, I don't know, it just lends itself just slightly more, you know, in terms of a little bit of a detail, you know, that people might kind of consciously think of or not. Might be just, you know, subconsciously kind of noticing or whatnot within the piece. Okay, so I'm going to allow now these branches up here that were stamped in areas that were very wet with a lot of deep saturations of several different values of blue up here, you know. These tree branches are going to be a little bit wet for a little bit of time, so we'll allow those to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll add on our kind of special effects and whatnot to this piece here, and should finish off the scene. I'm looking around and seeing if there's anything else that I want to add, but I think that looks pretty good. I'm not sure about the Doc Martens bleed-proof white effect here too. Originally when I was doing it, I thought I'd do it for sure, but I don't know if I'm going to do that on here. I might like it just kind of as is. Alright, but I'll decide that with fresh eyes after this dries, and I don't know, give it probably half an hour or something like that, I would say. And I think that would be safe to do some other touches. I don't want to like touch this either. It's like, it's not even the, you know, the application of media over the top of some wet things. It's just kind of, you know, kind of handling of this. I don't want to smear anything. And I tend to not like to heat set something. If I was in a hurry, no problem, okay? But sometimes I think it kind of warps the paper a little bit, and I have to kind of counterbend it a little bit more if I heat set it. So, all right. I'll get back to it when we get back to it. Look at that Caribbean blue. That Caribbean blue really helps in there, doesn't it? That little bit of warmth, warm blue. Okay, we've given this, I don't know, probably half an hour to dry or so. And set up. It looks like the areas of concern are largely dry. I can't tell if some of these leaves are 100%. Well, let me see. Okay, that should be fine. Now, if that was done in the VersaFine, it wouldn't have been fine after that length of time. But it would be a little bit darker and, you know, and as a result have a slightly bigger impact, stronger impact, I should say. I don't know if this is the same, but I don't know, just having things a little bit darker. But I will spray seal this, and it will make all of the imagery darker and more saturated as a result. Not quite as much as the VersaFine, but not bad. All right. So we have some Hero Hues, Unicorn White, just any kind of white pigment ink, except for Brilliance pigment ink. That dries a little bit too fast for this technique, but I have a kind of a frayed loosened up cotton swab here, okay? And if you want a soft application of something, then you need a soft applicator. So these work really well for that purpose, and you have to really kind of unravel them a little bit. We want to go for a dry brush application of this, okay? It's not a brush, but it's a dry application of this ink, so that it's a very light application of it, okay? And we are putting it in areas where light meets darker, okay? It doesn't have to be completely dark, but that's where this kind of effect would be taking place. It's kind of those transition areas. You can put it in some areas that are a little bit darker, but just in general, it can look a little bit strange if it's too dark, because what you're saying is that there's no light hitting that area. So what this represents is kind of some light hitting and reflecting off moisture in the air. So in a really dark area, you probably won't have any illuminated moisture because of the fact that there isn't any light there, okay? But this just kind of softens up some transitions as well. I mean, you know, it look fairly soft anyways because these areas in here are a little bit lighter. But let's take a look at this tree right here. See that? Where that kind of meets that, you know, that dog, a wolf. I'm going to just lighten that little part of the tree up a little bit, and plus the light is coming from this side, so putting some light on the left-hand side of the tree works for that purpose as well, but it also kind of pushes that tree a little bit farther back in the distance visually when you lighten something up. Let me try to get in here a little bit more. Okay, let's add a little bit more in here. Okay, I just re-inked my applicator just a touch. Now, if you try this, one of the things that everyone does right off the bat is they're just not used to using so little ink with just about, any type of medium. So they apply this down and they put this big glob of paint like that, okay? But you really want to take some off. You really want to take off more than you think. If you're doing this for the first time, you take off a lot more than you think you need to, okay? There's a lot more removed before the application. And then you kind of just go in with a soft touch, but sometimes when they remove ink off of their applicator like this, and they touch it down, it's so light that they can't see anything, so they smash it down, and then a big blob gets squeezed out of there again. So you kind of just want to get it to where the consistency is, where you just kind of touch it like that, and then you kind of, to get more opaque, you just kind of keep tapping it a little bit more, okay? It's not just to slow down the process or anything. Actually, it's not to slow down the process, but so that you have a lot of control over how much you apply. If it takes you 20 taps to get the look that you're going after, there's going to be a lot of control over it, because there's a lot of there's a lot of applications for that kind of subtle variation right there. All right, let's try it over here. So what we're doing here is we're kind of reiterating our lighting scheme, right? Remember we kind of, wiped off a lot of that ink to begin with at the base of these trees, and I'm just lightening it up a little bit more now that we get into it. So, when we're doing ink applications and making things darker, we're making our darker areas darker with darker inks. In the lighter areas, we're making things lighter with the lighter inks, in the form of some translucent pigment ink. Okay, these clouds up here, those clouds are fairly soft and billowy, but I can kind of come in here and make it even lighter and more billowy and soft and kind of diffused. And to the spirit of the material that it's made out of, composed of, which would be moisture in the air. We're kind of making it a little bit more soft and illuminated that way. This is kind of fun, you know, look at the distance that's conveyed now. Back there. It's kind of a little bit more atmospheric and kind of foggy and I don't know about mysterious, but there's a sense of some kind of emotion that's conveyed, you know, through the representation of light now, you know, and you can see right here where the you know, we're benefiting from the use of the lighter value, okay, and you're just stamping it out in some version of the color scheme that you're going with, okay. So I mean, if those trees were stamped in black, they would really, you know, I mean, it might look okay. I mean, I probably would have blotted off down here where it transitioned from black to gray, but look how much these hanging tree limbs really stand out as a result of having these trees here in a lighter value. And you don't have to, it really, you know, if you just lay your pads out, you know, be it whatever kind of color scheme you're working in, it's easier to see something that you're trying to conceive of when you make it visual, okay? If I don't pull these pads out like that type of thing, then I'm just kind of, you know, holding up a couple stamps and just thinking, okay, well, what would it look like if I stamped that out in blue or light blue? Now, you might know your stamps and colors so well that you can do that, but even for me, you know, I really try to make things nice and visual so I can have a better kind of understanding of a little bit more of what to expect. There's always kind of the unexpected that comes up, and you know, you can't predict things completely, but you can have a lot better idea of it by making something visual than to you know, kind of have some kind of theoretical kind of notion of what you're going to be doing. So I always do that, you know, the people that kind of took their pads, and I'm talking about for the beginners here, that took their pads out and kind of followed those kind of instructions, or you know, rather kind of guidelines in the classes. They never had to think about it again. You know, the whole process was made so much easier. And some people kind of learned, I don't know, not the hard way or something like that, but sometimes they're thinking, okay, this grass is going to be green, and this sky is going to be blue, so they just stamped out, you know, the grass. They just grabbed, you know, like a dark green. Okay, that's grass right there. And so everything kind of turns out a little bit kind of mono value or something like that, when they could have grabbed, you know, a lot of the lighter ones. I mean, it didn't happen too much, because I'd walk around and I'd make the suggestion before they started, you know, with the coloring process, but you know, it comes up once in a while. I'm just talking about for the intro to, you know, that type of color application. After you do it like a couple times, you don't have to do it again. Because it kind of gets ingrained. It's a little bit of a different concept, you know, thinking about different versions of a given hue. A lot of times they're thinking, okay, well, what color is grass? Let me pick out a grass green, so they'll just color it in one color. That's, you know, one style of kind of coloring. Okay, I want to, whatever, orange sun, so they're thinking, okay, what one color is the color for that sun that I want? So they'll get that, you know, but this is kind of like working through a range of a given hue for a, you know, kind of a deeper, more saturated effect. Okay, I'm going to apply some of this around my wools and hopefully make those wools a little bit more kind of integrated into the scene. So, see what I'm doing here. Remember how I kind of wiped off some of the ink off of some of these wools, parts of the wools. By doing this kind of this fog effect, what we're doing is we're kind of enveloping these wools in that kind of atmospheric mist or haze that we've established in the piece. See, sometimes I kind of add a little bit too much, so I kind of just blot it off with my finger. Putting some of that over some of the rocks right in there. Getting a little bit closer to the light over there, so maybe that little horizon, little bit has a little bit of this ink on it, making it a little bit more translucent. See, this white ink applied over things doesn't make it look white, you know, because it's too, you know, you know, translucent to do that type of job. One of these days I wish there was a real opaque pigment ink, but for this purpose this works ideal. You know, it's just like all of them, except for the brilliance. Brilliance is made to dry on you know, glossy paper or any kind of surface really quickly, so with this one I want it to, you know, I want to be able to manipulate it a little bit. I want to be able to remove some that, you know, in areas where that I apply too much. And just to, you know, it stays fairly moist on here as I apply it, so I can kind of spread it around through, you know, that repetition of tapping, that repetition of movement. Alright, so can you see that? Where it's, you know, we've got these, you know, this pack here, in the mist, wolves in the mist. Kind of the spirit of the wild, and to me, like, it looks like these wolves are having a really fun time, just kind of running wild. You know, in reality, they're probably running for their, you know, working for their, you know, their dinner or whatever. But yeah, maybe it's just kind of playtime. They want to go go out and have a great time with the family and run. A lot of sensory going on. Okay, adding some of this down in this water, seeing the lighter areas, I can apply some of this and make that area a little bit softer. See, even those little twigs down there, you can put a little bit over some of them and leave the others as is if you want, or whatever for variation. I love adding these different types of things in here. These little finishing touches. It can be a pretty significant addition to a piece, you know. I mean, if shading and coloring is a significant thing, this is kind of the... I won't say it's the opposite. It's the complementary type of thing. It's going in and adding highlights and texture, where the other one's adding kind of shading and intensity and I don't know, variation and temperature. You know, that's what I'm talking about. Color. This is adding texture too. It's really adding kind of a softer texture to things, you know, wherever you apply it, which really lends itself to kind of a nice rich surface area in terms of kind of just various aspects of visual language. I like this kind of this kind of lighting direction. I almost always kind of apply, you know, a darker perimeter around everything, but I guess having it open on one end looks pretty good in terms of really kind of you know, signifying, you know, a certain type of directional lighting. See, I've kind of applied some over in those leaves. Yeah, sort of lighter than the others. I think it looks strong as just a, you know, a more flat silhouette too, but I don't know, playing around with those leaves, it kind of varies it a little bit. Not that it has to be done, I like it flat too, you know, and the kind of a stronger kind of you know, silhouette, very flat look. I do like that look, like shadow puppets or something like that. All right, I think that looks okay. Let's take a white gel pen and reiterate a little bit of that lighting that's going on here even more. Put some white highlights on the sides of the trees that are facing that light. Okay, see that? It's just kind of, oops, in the lighter areas. Well, maybe you can't tell, but I've applied a little bit more light. But over here, it's just a couple little dots. Because that is a darker area, so we wouldn't have as many highlights, okay? I'm going to flip this over so I can access this portion of the scene a little bit easier. You don't always have to use your, have your scene, upright, in order to do whatever given marks you need to. Turn it in a way that where the axis is going to be the most conducive to the mark that you're going after. Just turning it upside down puts it right here for me instead of having to put my hand, right over the top of it. Okay, so see these trees right here. That's a little bit too dark, or too much. Let me just knock it down a little bit. I can remove some of it so it's not quite as strong of a line. Okay, let's use a little bit of a shimmering light down on the surface of the snowy bank. I'll show you what texture I'm going for here. A little closer up. So where I've really condensed some of the dots, then as I move away from there, I kind of space the dots out even more. So it's kind of in those illuminated areas, but we get a little bit more of this kind of surface shimmer look to the piece. All right, now there's some little rocks down in here. We can kind of, get a little bit of a highlight on them if we want to. Again, I'm kind of doing it on the direction, on the side of the rock that's facing the light, so kind of, it's like this rock right here, I'll put it, put it on mostly a little highlight on the left-hand side of that rock, or the rocks in that area. And everything we do like that, these little subtle little additions kind of keep reiterating this, you know, we're saying the same thing with all these different types of little touches right here. If you want to, you know, go really detailed, you can, you know, put some on the sides of some of these leaves facing the light, okay? That. These leaves right up here. We'll leave a little highlight on the side of it, so when it added up, you don't really notice it, you know what I mean? But it's one of those little subtle little details that I think collectively kind of add up to, you know, an overall statement. In this case, it's kind of statement on lighting. And let's show you where I've done it down here too. See, it's, I mean, it could be just a tiny little dot on the side of a rock. It's all on the left-hand side for the most part, facing that light. So collectively, you get this kind of overall textural shimmer. And kind of a reiteration of directional lighting within a given space. Now, where the light is kind of coming from over here. I mean, what you do on these leaves, you can put it anywhere. It's almost like bottom lit over here, so maybe put it on the little bottom of the leaf shimmer. Okay, how does that look? Ah, I love silver pens in a kind of a blue landscape like this. It's one of those little subtle things. Well, it could be as subtle as you want. It could also be very bold. If I did this silver pen on black, it would really stand out. But I'm just going to kind of add this in a couple of different areas that, you know, are roughly the same value. Well, I don't know, it's standing out a lot. But I'm putting this down here. It's just kind of that little shimmering light, you know, that's you know, a person, you know, that has the original of this would see more, you know, much more apparently. It's tough to kind of scan or photograph metallics a lot of times. I'll try to show you what I'm doing here now. We'll see if it shows up at all in this video, but I mean, I could see it right here, but all right, so, you know, looking at it like this, you really can't see that silver, but okay, oh, there it goes. See that? See where it's kind of coming to life all throughout here, and there's some more right down there. So kind of collectively, you know, that little type of effect can be pretty fun. Let's see, where's that wink of Stella? Here's the clear. The silver. The silver to me looks kind of greenish on this indexing, but it really isn't. Okay, so we need wink of Stella. When people were telling me that, wink of Stella, I was thinking, what is that called? You know? And then someone like spelled it out for me. Stella. Wink. You know, like, you know, you're winking an eye or whatever. And the folks, the fine folks out at the last Mesa. Maybe I don't want the silver one on here. That one stands out a little bit too much. I like it though. Let's go with the clear one. Let's add a little bit of this clear down here and add a little shimmer to the these surface areas, especially down on the snow. So illuminated snow. So retain some of the lighter areas of your snow. Okay, when you're doing this. In your water too, and it gives you the opportunity to have kind of these reflective types of touches within your piece. That could be rather quite subtle, you know. Alright, so say something like that, and it's more subtle, okay, it's not going to be like the metallic pins, but I can kind of see it here. It is very subtle. I could have shaken it up more, and it's a little bit more would come out of there. But anyways, I kind of have it up. You can see it a little bit. All right, so there we have it. The Blue Wolves. I don't know, that's not the name of the piece. That would be a horrible name, but a blue color scheme, wolf scene, that's what I was going after. And I just grabbed this piece of paper. I thought I was grabbing a quarter page, but it kept coming out, and I thought, let's do a half page scene of this. It would allow me a little bit more dialogue running across like that, and, you know, kind of reiterate my directional type of things, which can all be done. I mean, this scene would look, you know, pretty cool to me, and, you know, this scene looks good to me too, but, you know, the 11-inch kind of, I don't know, pushes that impact even more, you know, the lighter transitions in here. See those lighter trees in the background, how much more subtle they are now, especially after we've added all these tones in here and have some kind of foreground elements over the top of them, and then we've followed up with a little bit more hero hues, white pigment ink over the top of it, and, you know, kind of pushes it back in the distance. But all added up, you know, it kind of lends itself to this depth of field within this space, you know, where you have darker things in the foreground and lighter things in the background, and also kind of helps in terms of directional too. We have kind of darker, you know, and lighter as it moves out there, and then there it does, thus moving, running towards the light like that. So, and having a great time at winter time. So anyways, wolves having fun. Hope you enjoyed the scene. If you have any questions, comments, drop us a note in the comment section. And if you like this video, hope you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.